Once again, we have aggressive lighting because it's spring and there is no light outside. I kind of look dead, but I don't have time to figure out how to make me look alive. So let's go through my April reads and see if I remember anything I actually read. It's funny because last month somebody was like, "Do you retain things?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course I do." And then this month I started a new job and I'm not sure what I've retained that was read prior to the start date. We're gonna go with it, okay? We're gonna go through my April reads and we start out with my stats. And let's talk about how April went. In April, I read a total of 23 books, which is 7,765 pages. I also DNF'd one book. The moods are pretty standard, emotional, dark, tense, and mysterious. I guess it's slightly different than normal, but pretty much the same vibe. I rarely ever have like hopeful, happy, or inspiring things at the top of this list. The pace is, as always, medium. Somebody tell me what that stat really means. My page counts were pretty low. I was mostly under 500, split between 3 to 5 and under 3. I did read some nonfiction, so we have a little bit of nonfiction in the mix this month. This genre section is making me truly happy because I have queer books on top, sci-fi, literary fiction, fantasy. Those are my top 4. So we were gay and we were in SFF land, and I was happy in April. We also had some horror in there as well. My overall ratings for all 23 books, my average was 3.8 stars, which is not bad. I've basically been averaging around 3.5 to 4 every month, never fully 4 stars, but it's been in that ballpark. So for the most part, I seem to be liking what I'm reading every month, but of course there are some duds. So let's get into what I'm reading, or what I read, I should say. And I'm going to pull up my Bookly app like normal. And then, per usual, everybody's going to ask the same question, and that is, what is Bookly? And Bookly is an app I use to track my reading daily. It's really simple. I use it as a timer. It tracks how much I read. I like to see how much of my day is spent reading. It also makes this really easy to do. And I don't know, it helps me stay on my reading goal of reading every day for at least 30 minutes. So we'll start right here with Paris Hilton's Memoir, which is probably one of my favorite books so far this year because this book was so surprisingly good. I was expecting one thing and I got the complete opposite. I was expecting sort of a frivolous story about a rich girl, and what I got was her struggle with being in like a reform school and abused and all the things that happened to her, and reframing a lot of things that I knew about from growing up and watching Paris Hilton and knowing who she was as like a socialite and like a media sensation or whatever. And so it was really eye-opening, really good, addictive read. Absolutely love it. I wish more people were talking about this like they were. I'm glad my mother is dead. I wish it was getting as much attention. Please read this. You will be stunned. For Trans Girl April, I did read a bunch of books for Trans Girl April, and we'll hit on them as we go through these. And the first one I have here is An Unkindness A Ghost by Rivers Solomon. I did enjoy reading this. It is not my favorite of every River Solomon I've read, but it was very good. It's basically like Antebellum South in space. It is dystopian and upsetting and unsettling. It was good, but not my favorite. I still think like Sorrowland was amazing and like perfect. To Strip the Flesh by Oto Todo is a short story manga collection. The first short story is about a trans boy man. I'm not sure how old he is. He's also like an internet sensation. He's like an internet hunter. Like he is like a hunting vlogger. I don't know. That story itself is really interesting. He is struggling with telling his dad, who's also dying of cancer, that he is a is a boy, like, he's not his daughter, he's his son, and he's trying to figure out his own identity. He's trying to explain that identity to his father. He's trying to not upset his father because his father is dying. It's a very good short story, and I really did enjoy that manga, and that is the lead manga in this collection. The rest of them were kinda like hit or miss, so I'm not really sure about the collection on a whole, so I didn't really rate that highly because of the entire collection, but that one short story manga is phenomenal. The Dark Days Club by Allison Goodman. I loved this. This is a YA fantasy, like, slash Regency romance. If you've read The Secret History of the Pink Carnation, that entire series, it gave me those kinds of vibes, but basically with a reimagined or a spin on the vampire lore. It was just such a fun read. It's a trilogy. I already have book 2. It's on the list for May because it's just a pleasant read. So while you're reading a bunch of other things that are harder to read, whether it's subject matter or just difficulty in the text itself, these were just like the perfect light palate cleansing kind of read, or at least this first one was. So hopefully the rest of the series lives up to how much I enjoyed the first one. So now we have something that I know I'm going to get yelled at in the comments by Katie for, and that is my take on Cursed Bread by Sophie McIntosh. Now, Katie, I want to support Welsh writers. I want to be that champion with you, but I can't with Sophie McIntosh. Every time I've read 2 books of hers now, and fool me once, shame on you, fooled me twice, shame on me, because I read The Water Cure and I was sold this idea of this book that just didn't happen. And then again, Curse Bread, I was sold this idea of just like madness and mayhem, and that was like the last 10 or 15% of the book. The first 80, 90, somewhere in there, whatever. The remainder of the beginning half of this book was literally just a horny mess. And the thing that kills me the most about Sophie McIntosh is that the writing itself is so good, but I just am so let down by the stories and their execution. It's so frustrating because I start every book the same way so far, and I am gonna love this. This is gonna be great. This is gonna be awesome. What the heck's happening? Why is this not the book I'm reading? I thought you were gonna be this, and then I'm disappointed. It is a roller coaster of disappointment every freaking time I read her, and I guess I'm just gonna have to not read her anymore. Sorry, Katie. This is another book for trans girl April. Hell Followed With Us by Andrew Joseph White. And this is another YA book, and this was this was really interesting. I think what I liked the best about this was how it dealt with the religious aspects of like transphobia and homophobia and the pushback that this book does on a religiously crafted hate, essentially. I thought this was really good. I understand why so many people love it. It is dark. It is teens basically like fighting for their own existence, and it's brutal, but it does take on a lot of religious imagery and things, and pushes back on, I want to say, the Christian right, but like phenomenal. And then I did, this is my chonker of the month. I did a buddy read with Rogers Reads here on YouTube, and we were just boxering each other back and forth, and I loved that. So Roger, we need to do another buddy read. We read A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon, and this was great. I think I like this more than Priory, but I need to reread Priory because it's been a few years to like fully like commit to that assessment. But Priory, no, sorry. A Day of Fallen Night is like a prequel to Priory. I love getting another chapter in this world, and I also love that in the author's interview at the end of the audiobook, she says she's like gonna write more books in this world. And it's just kind of weird because I feel like she's like, no, they're standalones, but she's really writing a series, but it's almost like she's writing a series out of order, or like at least like in the order that her brain wants to write the books. But so, like, we're gonna be getting books probably in this series, like, all over the timeline of Priory, but it was really nice to get more information on a story that I really loved, and I do need to reread it, like I said, Priory, so that I can fill in some of the missing pieces, but this was a fantastic, fantastic read, 4 stars, loved it, and I need more, and I'm very happy that we're going to get more. And one of the things that both Roger and I loved in this book was having like older lesbian couple who are like established, and it's not this young love like give and take, like no, you have like people with like soft bellies and cellulite loving each other, and that was great. I love that. I love like a mature love story. Anyway, A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. I already have a review of this on the channel, so I'm not going to say too much, but I loved it. Yes, please read this. Feed Them with Silence. I did read for Trans Girl April, and I'll be quite honest, I don't remember a lot about this other than the fact that like our main character does some sort of scientific work and ends up through that having to like she's doing experiments with like putting basically like putting her brain into that of a wolf and then living with wolves, and then that has repercussions for her regular life, and like I just didn't care most of the time while I was reading this, and that was the problem, is that I just was never invested, and so I really could give two flying forks about this book. So it might be good for somebody who's invested and really enjoying it, but, like, it never hooked me, so it just kind of washed over me, and I don't care. However, Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt, which I also read for Trans Girl April, was phenomenal. I do have an attempt at a review filmed for this. I need to edit it. It's a hard book for me to do a review on because I don't want to spoil anything for you, but simply said, it is dark, it is brutal. There's the use of like a haunted house as it is part of this storytelling. It is twisted and dark and so angry, and you feel the rage, and it's so hard to articulate. It's so hard to articulate anything about this book without ruining something about this book, but I love this book. I will be rereading this book. I need to own this book physically, and I think it's a must read if you can get through the trigger warnings. There's a long list of trigger warnings that are included in the front of the book, so I would look those up. But I love this, phenomenal, 5 stars, fantastic read. Song of the Cell I read with Samantha. It's a nonfiction book just about cellular biology and like the history of cellular biology, which I know from school, all the many cell bio classes I've taken over all of my schooling. There's a lot of just like history of medicine in general, how cellular biology is being used to advance medicine. And what I really love about books like this is that when you're reading the history bits, you look at certain things and you're like, what do you mean they didn't know to wash their hands? That's so silly. And then you realize that, like, in 20, 30, 100 years, someone's going to look at us and be like, what do you mean they were giving people chemo? That's poison. Why aren't they doing whatever the thing is that we advanced to, you know? So it's just really interesting to see how far we've come, how much we've learned, and then remembering that there is still so much that science doesn't know, and so many more advancements that are going to keep occurring over time. So I always find these books really interesting and reflective in that kind of way. And this was good. It was a very well written, so it's easily like narrative nonfiction. So it's easy to follow. It's engaging. The author weaves his own stories into it. You also sort of get a sense of how small the scientific community really is, and how many people know each other and how many people influence each other and all that. If you have had like any amount of schooling on the subject, it could be a little bit boring at some point, but for somebody who doesn't know a ton about like science, biological sciences, cellular biology, all that, I think it would be a really interesting read. It was good. Of Cattle and Men was kindly sent to me uh, by Charco Press, and I am torn on this book because I was expecting it to be like more dark, more twisted, more violent, more just more. And it was a little bit subtler, the violence in this book. It was a little bit subtler. It was more about like imagery and symbolism than about like actual brutality. That kind of knocked this down for me because what I was expecting and what I wanted never really fully materialized. But the writing is phenomenal. It's translated from the Portuguese, Ana Paula, I don't, is it Maya? She's Brazilian, I believe, and it's phenomenally written. The writing is lyrical and fantastic, but I just kind of felt a little let down by the time I got finished with it because I really wanted this darker, twisted world than I got. It's set in a slaughterhouse, and something's going wrong with our main character. He's quite violent. He makes some interesting decisions. The men in this slaughterhouse are kind of a little violent. They're a little rough around the edges, a little grim. It's a slaughterhouse. It should be grim. The cows go mad, but somehow it's like it's missing some oomph. I don't know how to say, I don't know. For me, this is just middle of the road. I will definitely read from this author again because the writing itself was so good. Just the story needed a little, I don't know, maybe it's even just the translation. Maybe the translation didn't give enough edge to it. I don't know. And then I have a couple cute things here. So I read a Rover story, which is a little middle grade, which I don't read a lot of middle grade. It's a story about the Mars rover, and it's just sweet. I think it's cute. If you want a middle grade, I would read this. It's a good time. It's about the rover itself. It's about this woman that's working on the rover. It's about her daughter and the stresses she has because her mom's so busy working on the rover. It's about some of the jealousy this child has with the Mars rover. It's a really cute story. It's adorable. If you want something adorable, I'd read this. I always read Katie O'Neill books. She does the Tea Dragons, Princess for Princess or Princess Princess, a couple other graphic novels. She had a new one out called The Moth Keeper, so I had to put it on hold, and I really want a physical copy of it. And I love this story. It's about this sort of outsider, someone who feels outside of their community, and they have these really special moths that are only out at night, and so they have to be separate from the community, and then they have to lead the moths back to where they live at night, and some things happen with the moths, and it's just all of Katie O'Neill's stories are very like heartwarming and diverse and like warm hugs. So I will forever get whatever graphic novel they come out with because they're just phenomenal. They're always phenomenal. And the artwork, I just love it. It's super cozy. It's so good. This is a book I need to do a full review on for the channel. So we're gonna go a little like quickly on this, but this is Whose Names Are Unknown by Samora Bab and sorry, Sonora Bab. So Sonora Bab wrote this before Grapes of Wrath, and there is sort of like a sordid history with this story, and there is a big question mark about how much Steinbeck knew about this and if Steinbeck took this book from her and created The Grapes of Wrath. I'm fairly certain I read The Grapes of Wrath in high school, but I do not recall it. So before I make this review, I really want to reread Grapes of Wrath and kind of compare the experience. But this is a book similar to Grapes of Wrath, obviously. They had the same publisher, and the publisher was basically like, "Oh no, sweetie, like we don't want your book because like this book's out now." Then she continued to not be a writer and do other things, and I think she worked her history is sort of like she worked very closely with like migrant farmers and people affected by the Dust Bowl and the people that exist in her story. She knew very well because she lived with them. She got down and dirty with them, and she wrote a story that you can feel the realness of it. It's beautifully written and it's heartbreaking, and I really need to reread Grapes of Wrath so I can see how they differ, because this is supposed to be like a better Grapes of Wrath. Uh, I think from like a realism perspective, like it is more realistic to the existence in the during during this period, during the Depression, during the Dust Bowl. So that's coming. Very interesting. Absolutely love this, by the way. 5 stars. A Song for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers is my first Becky Chambers. This book was so adorable. I need this in hard copy, and I need to read the second book. But so cute, so cozy, so amazing. I will be eventually doing a review of both of these on the channel for cozy fantasy reviews, but how have I not read Becky Chambers before? So good, 5 stars, must read. The Colony by Audrey McGee was also fantastic. This is a 4.5 star read for me. It's only taking half a star off because they didn't throw that douche in the ocean because he was so terrible. So this is a story about this Englishman who comes to the small Irish village on a little remote island to paint. And on that island is also this Frenchman, but he's there and he's like studying, he's a linguist, and he's all about like preserving the heritage of Ireland and their language and all this, and not introducing anything to taint this like perfect time capsule of this island and these people that basically don't for the most part speak English or have a lot of like interaction with Englishmen. And in comes this Englishman, and he is annoying and he is terrible, and he's a jackass to the young man on this island. There's also a young man who is trying to sort of separate himself from his Irishness. He wants to be more modern and go to London and be an artist and do these things, and he's kind of stuck between two worlds. It's phenomenally written. It's interspersed with news clippings of um, things, or news bulletins on the radio of things that have occurred during the Troubles in Ireland. So of people being murdered, of people being bombed, of all that stuff, and it's done in such a way that really brings home the terror of those times. And this was absolutely a phenomenal read. Must read. Pandora's Jar by Natalie Haynes. This is a collection of Greek myths about the women of Greek myths and looking at them from a different perspective, basically giving agency or voice to a lot of the women of Greek myths and maybe framing some of their stories so that perhaps they are not villains or temptresses or what have you, but they're actually like strong, independent people or like victims of certain circumstances. I mean, we've all seen the Medusa was framed. So this was a really interesting look at the women of Greek myths. And I, I, I highly recommend if you like Greek mythology and you want more, I would read this. I don't know why I'm so like handsy today, but I am. A Ghost in the Throat was absolutely phenomenal. This is a memoir. It was so good, so beautifully written. I have a review coming for you, so that will be out. So you can look for that, but must read. It's beautiful. It talks about motherhood, women in literature, women being written out of stories, writing women back into them. It's phenomenal. Sister Maiden Monster by Lucy Snyder was not as good as I wanted it to be. So this is sort of a dystopian world where this virus comes. It's post-pandemic, so this is like a new pandemic. But basically, like if you don't die, something happens to you, like you change and you might want to eat brains. You might want to like suck blood. You might want to different things. So there's different classes of people that have recovered from this, and I try to like section people off and do things, and things obviously don't go to plan, and it's very dystopian and it's kind of dark. And I did like it, but I really wanted this to be like a 5 star read, but it kind of wasn't. But I did enjoy it. It is very dark. There's a lot of body horror, there's a lot of gore. I don't know, maybe it was fine. I don't know. It was okay. It was fine. It follows 3 different characters who eventually like converge and meet, and they have to like, you know, resolve everything at the end. For my Patreon, we read Magic for Liars by Sarah Gale. This is the author of The Echo Wife, I believe, and I haven't read that, but I know some people really did like that. But Magic for Liars was kind of like middle of the road for me. It started off really good. I was really into it. It was engaging. I liked the setup and the premise. It's you have a like a PI who has to go to this magical school. Like I think it's outside of Oakland, and investigate this murder. And the PI's sister also works there. And the kids are all really interesting. And the school is kind of it's a really interesting setup. It had a lot of promise, but at the end of the day, the reveal and all of that was kinda lackluster, and it didn't deliver what I had hoped it would, so middle of the road. I generally liked the premise of this, and I would like to read more books like this, I just want them better done. Kate Elliott's Unconquerable Son I finished, just in time to squeeze it into my April wrap-up. This was really interesting, so it's supposed to be sort of a Alexander the Great retelling, but in space. It's very interesting. There's a lot of political intrigue. There's a lot of action, like so much action. If you want a sci-fi that's filled with action scenes, this is a really good one. They're always like fighting, or somebody is like doing something to them, or they're running away, or there's so much movement and action. So if that's your jam, uh, this is great. There are forbidden loves, there are like warring factions. It's space, but it's not like interstellar space. Like you're not going between planets. You're on a planet. And so it doesn't always feel like you're in space. Like I kind of have to remember that we're in space. There's a lot of betrayal, a lot of intrigue, and I can't wait to get to book two. I definitely would recommend. My one DNF is The Bitter Orange Tree, and I got about 40% of the way into this. This was our Patreon pick for TBR Lowdown, and a lot of us either didn't like it or didn't finish it because it was just like I was so bored. I was so bored. I was like, "What is the point of this book?" It was like someone reading me their laundry list. So I was like, I have things to do with my life. I'm moving on. So I moved on. And then last but not least, we have Ice by Anna Coven, which I do want to make a review of and on, but I need to try to like collect my thoughts. So the author herself is very interesting to me. She kind of gives me Tove Diddleson, I think that's her name, the childhood youth dependency author. She kind of gives me those kinds of vibes in terms of being a phenomenal art author, or female author who also is battling with addiction and other things through like mental illness while being a phenomenal artist in like kind of a similar time period they're kind of writing in. Obviously, they have more recognition than Anna Kavan does, but this is her sci-fi novel, and it is a very tough book to talk about because the narrative is very like meandering. They change point of views randomly, which can get very jarring, but it's essentially about this dystopian future where it almost feels like a climate change thing where like the you're going into another ice age, and there's this ice that's like constantly coming. So there's this doom and gloom of this ice coming and cutting off people and civilization and just like ruining the world, and like there's just this fear always in the background of like, is the ice going to be there? And there's this woman, and she is cold and waif-like and alluring, and our main narrator is like obsessed with her, and he's kind of following her all around trying to get her, and she's this victim of desire and abuse. It's a very complex, very beautifully written book. I mean, there's passages in here that are just absolutely stunning, and I need to read more from this author because the writing itself just blew me away. It also kind of gave me this cat and mouse thing that's going on throughout the story, and the fact that it's going all over Europe, kind of, and even though it's not fully named as Europe, but like they're kind of going all around Europe hunting. He's hunting for something and he's so obsessed with it. And there is this sexual nature to it. I kept thinking about Gravity's Rainbow. especially because there were moments that were sort of convoluted and different, or like convoluted, just not straightforward, not linear either sometimes. And so I had these moments of feeling like I did when I was reading Gravity's Rainbow and like watching Slothrop and everybody chasing him chasing this thing with his erection, this rocket and his erections. And it was a very interesting experience reading this, is I guess what I'm trying to articulate. And now you understand why I haven't done an individual review on it yet, because I have not figured out how I want to talk about this. But phenomenal, would recommend, need to read more from her. Just this writing was just superb, like so good, so freaking good. If you've read any of these, I would love to know your thoughts on them. Let me know if there was anything you read in April that was particularly that stood out particularly for you, because I would love a good recommendation. If you have anything for cozy fantasy that you think I should read while I am on this long-term journey of cozy fantasy reading, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video, whatever it may be, because it's my channel and I can do whatever I want. Bye.
So just sit with me, talking to the night until the morning, building chemistry. I don't think I ever wanna go come closer next to me, trying to find another way to say this, but